several years of covering their games, I've come to realize that IV Studios doesn't really do normal. As an ambitious young studio born out of their history within the field of animation, it seems like they've always been hungry with something to prove, like they're always swinging for the fences, and that doesn't always work out. I mean, only about half their games really hit for me, but the ones that I like, I tend to love, which is what brings us to today's game, their cooperative deck builder, Honor's End. Though it can be played as a one-and-done session with no continuity or story to keep up with, think arcade mode in old-school video game terms, the meat of the design is really geared towards the campaign, where you follow the quite literal script, even including some stage direction. I mean, who does that in a board game? It's awesome. There's chapter-specific baddies to fight, allies to rally, and equipment to use, and progression unlocks hidden materials which in turn become available for future sessions of any mode you play. But how do you play? In general, the game pits you against 3 enemies fought in succession, with victory upon reducing the final villain's health to 0. Each turn, the villain ticks up a notch, which might make the overall scenario's bad stuff meter tick up a notch. Then the villain does a bad thing based off of where their own notch is, which is reset after you go on to the next villain in this scenario. Then players divide up accumulated threat dice, roll to see what mitigatable bad stuff is happening this turn, then play their hands to deal damage to the enemy, block impacts of the threat dice, and accrue spendable use it or lose it resources onto tracks, in broad terms representing the support of the church and the state that will grant access to more powerful cards in their decks, equipment with passives, and if you're the lead player of the round, shareable effects, and recovery of your honor, which works as a shared life pool. Key to what makes Honor's End tick is the sequencing of card play that was first laid out in IV's debut game, Moonrakers. On any given turn, you have a default single card play from your hand, but that card play can either branch into playing more cards in this sequence or even allow an additional card play with its own subsequent branching paths. And the vast majority of cards have these synergistic abilities, additional effects that are listed at the bottom that are either additional actions or more potent versions of the action that you're playing the card for, that could be paid for by discarding or rather tucking other cards of particular suits along with this card as it's being played. Even within your first game, you'll be able to tell that this becomes extremely nuanced and leads to no obvious turns, which is a cool and crunchy solution to the traditional deck building problem where the games have a tendency to have a sort of autopilot feel. Though you could also argue that's what fans of the genre, especially dedicated fans of the genre and its early iterations, are really looking for in a deck building game. This system begs for careful consideration both in how you sculpt your turn, but also how you sculpt your deck, with tons of ways to trash cards or draft new characters and abilities through moving up the available tracks. And if you're like me, initially you're going to be like, I don't know, this equipment card on its own seems like a real minor thing to define my character power, to distinguish me from other players, but as the game goes on, you see that this passive effect in relation to the card play that you're doing and the accrual of additional equipment creates so much opportunity for unique and interesting builds. From manic card draw engines treating the majority of your deck as wild suits for power-up purposes, to my personal favorite, a tank that rewards taking on and dealing with threat dice, with retaliation damage and more chances to reduce the overall threat pool. The more you play, the more you'll realize just the symbiotic relationship between these equipment cards and how you add, sculpt, and ultimately trash cards from your deck. And all of this, even in the campaign mode, is for a self-contained game. Part of what makes Honor's End so compelling to me is that even though the pressures you fight against might change, this sense of build and escalation and growth is smartly handled in a singular session. Though there is a sense of disconnect when the only thing that carries over is progress and any cards that you've unlocked. Some are going to chafe at the fact that you aren't building your ongoing character throughout the campaign, but in turn, you get more game-to-game flexibility. It encourages experimentation. I just wish the threat you were adapting to was as dynamic. While my preview copy of Honor's End is only a prototype with the first few scenarios, so there's room for surprises down the road, the enemies I'm facing are generally pretty flat. Sure, their starter turn abilities might change, you get some injury cards to clog up your deck, and there's the old standby of the extra permanent or temporary threat dice added as the mission clock ticks up. They might have you discard cards or prevent use of the bonus dice you can accrue, but mechanically they're fairly flaccid, never really demanding you account for them in your player builds. The writing is colorful, visually they're incredibly distinct, but in contrast to the heavily thematic gameplay on the part of the player, there just aren't a lot of levers they can pull to differentiate a bear from a sorcerer. If there's any other criticisms I have for Honor's End, a game that I like quite a lot and hold up to some of the best in Ivy's catalog, it's that the game does lend itself to some self-indulgent faffery. With what feels like dozens of possible permutations in how you play out your sequence of cards in hand, let alone possible results of cards and subsequent plays, you can get really granular with analyzing sequence of play for maximum utility, sometimes for barely any change in outcome. Like anything, with more experience, with time, it's going to become more intuitive. You're going to get better and have better instincts as you play this game. But if you are someone who is prone to over-analysis, then my God, you can sink so much time into deciding, well, if I played this card first, then I played this one, but maybe I want to use this for its suit, and that'll power up this, and then I could play this, which leads to this, or what if I use my dice here? If I do that and I have a possible outcome of this, I might be able to draw a card, and then, like I said, self-indulgent faffery. But with that aside, what you're left with is a game that feels really good to play, with a keen escalation of power and a sense of potent growth that goes in opposition to the mounting threat that you're having to deal with. And some of the most creative and engaging card play out of a pure deck builder in a long time. Pair that with the stellar production and cunning storytelling Ivy is known for, Honor's End is not quite like anything else out there. It's ambitious, it's creative, and it's fun, and fans of either deck building or strategic co-ops are going to want to pay attention. And that's our review, but let me know, what is your favorite Ivy Studios game, and what are some games that really swung for the fences and feel unconventional or bucking trends that ended up working for you? Put it in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching, supporting, subscribing, doing all the things. It means the world. And of course, as always, thanks for being such a great community. You know that I've been Jack for the Cardboard Herald.